Hey everybody, thanks so much for being here with me and Sienna. We are going to start our knowledge shared series. So thanks for being here. I'll start with everyone introducing themselves. So Sienna, I know you of course because you're on my team, but will you just tell everybody kind of what you do for our team?
Absolutely. I am the content director and editor of Empowering Pumps and Equipment, and I had the great pleasure of meeting Vanessa Levy at a SWAPA meeting a couple years back, and the great work that she does with WWEMA. And so I was so glad that Vanessa and Tina agreed to join us as part of our Knowledge Shared video series. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. So Vanessa, tell us a little bit about your role there at WWEMA.
Oh, sure. Good morning, by the way, and I'm glad to be able to be here. So I'm the executive director of the Water and Wastewater Equipment Manufacturers Association. We're a nonprofit association that was formed in 1908 to represent the interests of water and wastewater technology manufacturers. And I've been here, I guess, going on about 6.5 years.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you're there. We love having women in leadership roles. So thank you for taking that on and being a role model for us. Tina, what do you do there for the company?
Yes, good morning. Thank you again for having us. I'm the program manager with WWEMA. I haven't been with WWEMA as long as Vanessa. I've been with the organization about 1.5 years. And being a relatively small staff, I do a lot of things for our association, as we all do. I do a fair amount of legislative tracking and a lot of outreach with our members, as well as marketing, social media, various things along those lines.
Oh, I love hearing that. Y'all know how much I love social media and advocacy. So putting those things together is awesome. And, you know, I think to Sienna's point, we meet so many people through our, I guess, trade show experiences and organizations that we get to meet with. But you're doing a lot of work that we don't, get to see hand in hand with different government regulations and dealing directly with the manufacturers on that. Can you tell us a little bit about this time that we're in? What was the main concern from the organization when we kind of went into COVID?
So from our perspective, since we do represent manufacturers, there was a real concern when individual governors and states started shutting down essential businesses, just ensuring that not only were the water and wastewater utilities considered essential and able to continue to operate, but also the manufacturers and the suppliers that provide the chemicals, the pumps, the treatment technologies that ensure continued sustainability in the water sector. And so that was something really big that we took on right away with EPA, and we were able to work with them, and they sent a letter out to all the governors very early on, just ensuring that they're complying with the CISA, essential services designations. There's 16 sectors and water is one of those. And making sure that the utilities recognize that, and the governors, that the manufacturers and suppliers were critical as well. And so that actually was critical for us and keeping our manufacturing plants open and operating.
Yeah, I remember seeing and kind of hearing the buzz about that. And, even on the wastewater side, like all of this is essential work. And, you hear so much about washing your hands and the medical industry during this time. But we know, because we live it every day in the pump and equipment world, this equipment is essential to our lives every day. And I'm just thankful that they have these organizations like WWEMA that can get involved early and make sure that we can work, because it could have easily been, I'm sorry, that's not really essential and then we would have had even more fallout there. So as we connect with the members, and I'm thinking about this kind of in a different way, how are you reaching out to members right now?
So we've really continued our communications that we had set up before. Tina's been very active in putting together what we call our member bulletin. And so that's information that we bring together and usually send out to our members every couple of weeks. And we're calling information from legislation, from regulation, from national policy, international issues, and consolidating everything down to very bite-sized readable information that our members then have links and they can connect with and do a deeper dive on those issues. And we also thought it was really important to be a resource for our members with regard to all of the information that was coming at just a rapid clip on COVID-19. So just keeping them abreast of what was happening at the White House, at CDC, OSHA, public health concerns. So we put very quickly together a fact sheet with those credible resources because there was so much information floating around. We wanted to make sure that they had the official credible resource that they could then depend on. So we've been updating that on a regular basis. And then another important document that we put together that was for our members only actually was a business continuity fact sheet where we were talking about what are the impacts of COVID for their supply chain, for business interruptions, for resources that they had to operate their business, like the Paycheck Protection Program, and the other information that could help them sustain their own businesses during this time. So those were two very important documents that we put together and that we continue to maintain. And then of course, we're like everybody else, and then I'll let Tina speak to some of the work that she's been doing, but we've certainly been enhancing, I think, our communication and sharing a lot of information about all the tens of thousands of webinars that are popping up and keeping our members involved in that. So yeah, then I'll let Tina chat about some of the things she's been doing.
Yeah, Tina, I wanted to know like how the membership, are they being more responsive during this time because they're, you know, more, I don't know, I don't even think that they're more at home. So how is it communicating with them? Have you seen an increase?
And that's kind of an interesting question. I think we have definitely increased our contact both sort of through formal channels and informal channels, whether those are phone calls or more formal channels. I was going to mention something we did separate from the business impact fact sheet. We did a business impact survey. Mm-hmm. So this, I know that a lot of organizations and associations have done those, but this was actually a fairly deep dive in comparison to, you know, a 5 or 6 question survey where we asked our members, first of all, what were they doing on site to respond? I mean, some of the very basic things that many businesses are doing, whether it's more frequent cleaning, different shift schedules, things of that nature. And then what were the financial impacts? What were they seeing, as Vanessa mentioned, some issues around supply chains. So we really wanted to do that really for 2 purposes. One, to just even begin to understand what these issues were and convey that back to our members, because they have a lot of uncertainty. And again, there is a lot of uncertainty out there in terms of what the future holds. So we want to, you know, quantify or put some parameters around what that might look like in terms of what are they expecting in terms of revenue. We actually, even though our survey sample was relatively small, we were able to divide it between our manufacturing members and our manufacturing representatives. Okay. So one interesting takeaway that we found from the survey was that the manufacturers reps, who are perhaps maybe a little closer to the municipal market, actually were a little more optimistic. So as I think our survey said in the conclusion, although certainly impacted and significantly impacted by this in comparison to other industries, let's say travel, the impacts were somewhat blunted because, again, being an essential business, you know, when a line breaks or, you know, your filter's not working and your turbidity level's high, you can't, you know, wait for next month to fix that. You need to fix it immediately. So having that essential designation, and more importantly, having that be recognized so that there aren't issues with delivery or access to a site was something that we worked very hard to make sure our members had in terms of moving forward.
Yeah, I think that is such a great point and something that we've heard. I know, Sienna, we brought it up on one of our meetups that, you know, what if you have a break in your supply chain? What do you do? That was one of the questions. And, you know, just first of all, making sure that they're able to work. So, you know, getting involved and making sure that there's kind of this list of equipment that is used on a regular basis.
And I want to interject a quick minute. So WWEMA offered direct support in sort of acting as a bridge to legislature to help obtain those designations. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that worked?
Well, we were specifically working with the EPA on that, because they were tied into early on some of the decisions that the governors were making. And so we were part of a conversation with them and a recognition. I think initially their thought was more of a concern about the chemical aspects of utility sustainability. So were they able to get the chlorine? Were they able to get the chemicals that they needed to operate? And so when we were able to speak with them about, no, it's also pumps, it's filters, it's all of the mechanics that operate in a water or wastewater system, then they expanded that letter that they sent out then to all the governors and said, oh, it's the broader issue of the water and wastewater technology, not just chemicals. And so I think that was really a very critical first step that we took, that I'm really proud of, that we were able to do for our technology folks.
Yeah, and Vanessa, isn't it it's really our responsibility all the time, right, to educate legislature and people who are making these calls on our processes that maybe they're not as familiar with. It's our job to educate them. Really all associations that are engaged with equipment are looking to say, this is vital, this is how this process works, this is how it could be better. What's the role of an association kind of outside of a critical time, right, to be able to talk with authorities on what the standard should be or the regulation? What do you do on the normal?
So we have three major pillars that form the umbrella under which we work, and we call it advocate, inform, and connect. And so on advocate is where we're connecting on a regular basis with our Congress, sending letters, talking to folks up there about various issues. We also connect and advocate with EPA on all of their regulations. Some of the things that we've been working on right now are some peak wet weather flows regulation. We've been involved in monitoring what's happening with the lead and copper and harmful algal blooms, because essentially all of these ultimately get down at some level to technology and the ability of technology to solve environmental and public health problems. And so our perspective from WWEMA is the voice of the manufacturer. And that's sometimes different than the voice of the utility. In fact, many times different than the voice of the utility. The goals are always typically ultimately the same, but the way that we get there and the role and the necessity for technology and ensuring that that voice is there to let our congressmen as well as our EPA staff know that technologies are there and they're available and they can solve those problems. We also, as an organization, work very closely with the Department of Commerce, because a number of our members actually do a lot of exporting and importing. And so the challenges that we face with supply chain internationally, as well as the barriers, both tariff and non-tariff, that we encounter when we try to do business internationally as well. So those are sort of the major areas in which we advocate. And then on inform is a lot of what we do on a regular basis, which is keeping them up to date on the issues, cutting edge, new things that are cropping up, what's happening in Congress, what's happening at EPA, where they can get involved, where our voices need to be heard. And then the connect is really important on a number of different levels. It's connecting our own members so that we can learn from each other and understand best practices and grow our businesses. But it's also connecting with those thought leaders in the industry so that we understand where new technologies are coming, cutting edge issues, problems that need solutions. So those are the areas in which we operate on a day-to-day basis. And we cover, I think, probably fairly equally across all of those. And then for connecting, we also have meetings on a fairly regular basis. Fortunately, not for the latter part of the year, but that's a way that we connect as well with our members.
Awesome. Well, thank you for going through that. Tina wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Sure. I know Vanessa was talking about, and your question really went to what's a typical role, but I thought maybe I'd address the flip side of that. What has been happening during this time, and really it's been extremely critical to get information to our members at lightning speed as it's evolving and changing, particularly programs that we might not have necessarily had to follow so closely for our members. Some of the small business administration loans, for example, the Paycheck Protection Program, making sure we were on top of that, understanding the different qualifications and certifications required, because we, like many businesses, despite the fact that they were still operational, they were experiencing financial strains, and this would allow some of our smaller members, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, to maintain their viability during this critical time with these different types of bridge loans or loans that can be forgiven if they're allocated in a certain way, making sure they understood some of those requirements. So I think in this instance, information flows in two directions, right? We're both channeling information from Washington to our members, and at the same time, we're listening to their needs and trying to best represent them on the Hill or through regulatory comments in terms of weighing in and making sure their perspective and voice is heard.
I'm just thinking as you're talking, Tina, I'm like, wow, what a year you have had. Jump in, full speed ahead. But that was real, and that responsibility you felt to get that information out to your members and say, like, you need to have that. I mean, I felt that even in my own small business. Like, we have contractors, and I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of, and you just didn't know if you were doing enough, right? If you were able to send them the most up-to-date information, like you said. But I appreciate you doing that for our industry, and knowing like that it was right now, that's what we need to send out. We have to inform them about this and taking that on, instead of, going into the crisis with a lot of people and just hoping someone will take care of us, right?
Right, and it was kind of interesting, I found during this time, particularly as I'm interviewing you right now on my dining room table, the lines between work and home blend. In fact, as I sort of, would officially sign off from work and go walk into my living room, I'd be listening to the evening news. In some ways, it was really a continuation of my work in terms of following and monitoring things. And I, felt a real responsibility and sensitivity as I thought about particularly our small and medium members. They're third generation families running these businesses. And I and our whole organization works very hard to make sure that there's a fourth generation running these businesses, and that they do in fact weather the storm and come out the other end. If not whole, certainly in a much better position, having had WWEMA be there and be an advocate for them.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Go ahead, Sienna.
I just had a question. I think I remember reading a report, I believe it was published by Bluefield Research, something like the municipal water sector is going to experience a shock to something like $69 billion. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The challenges that we're facing right now in the industry is because the water and wastewater utilities have been significantly impacted with revenue shortfalls. The estimates right now are 20 to 40% perhaps. And those are due primarily to having, moratoriums on water shutoffs. So when people have lost jobs, they're balancing the financial challenges they have. Water often falls to the bottom as far as being able to pay, those monthly bills. And so utilities essentially are under a moratorium. They're not allowed to shut off. And because of the sanitation concerns regarding particularly this COVID-19 pandemic, it was really critical for those utilities to get that service turned back on in those locations where they'd been cut off before. And then there's also this concern about the lack of revenue generated from industrial sources. Companies aren't working, businesses aren't operating. And so that's a significant issue that the water utility organizations are definitely taking on. And I think we'll have ultimately some real impact down the line as far as us moving infrastructure along, that we've got to get them made whole first before we're even able to have a conversation about an infrastructure stimulus package down the way.
Yeah, and it's so true. I know in the month of May, we're used to celebrating Infrastructure Week. I think this year Infrastructure Week has been moved to later in the year, changed their name a little bit and changed their hashtag. So we'll be sharing those in our episode notes. But it is important, that we have the right funding for infrastructure. I live in Chicago, and I can tell you that there are reports of people who live on the south side, because the pipes in their building have burst, they're unable to even access the water, and they've been opening hydrants to collect water on the south side because they just don't have it running in their buildings. So there are very critical water infrastructure issues even in our own country that still need to be addressed, and so we're all going to keep doing our best to highlight that and keep advocating for those essential needs, because water is vital. Charlie says it all the time. It's so true.
That's right. I think it's definitely something that, as an industry, we highlight. We take care of our members as far as associations. We take care of our industry as a media company and sharing the information. But as far as, every day it's about taking care of people, right? The people are the essential part of all of this. I'm really excited. By the time this comes out, we will have launched our June issue of Empowering Pumps and Equipment on essential workers, being a big part of that, and the role that equipment plays on that. And so I'm excited to have that feature, not only the equipment, but the people. And as you know, and I will say this, you are essential right here on this screen, because just imagine the lives that you've changed by sending out that information and being an advocate for these members. So I thank y'all for that. Vanessa, is there anything kind of as we've been talking that you thought, okay, I really want to share this to the audience?
Well, I think moving forward, obviously Congress has taken a lot of steps to try to make individuals, state governments, healthcare workers whole, in the sense of trying to provide financial support. And it's likely, we think, that we might be seeing something with an infrastructure stimulus package down the way. And I think an important aspect of that is ensuring that we're able to collectively speak as one voice for the water industry. And so that's another area that we've really stepped up in the last couple of years, and it's become even more critical in the last several months, where we've really increased our communication and coordination with all of the other water associations in DC and around the country, so that we're communicating on probably a weekly, if not daily basis, sending joint letters to Congress, identifying joint priorities, and trying to get that message across as one voice, so that we're not sending a lot of different messages to Congress that gets diffused and confusing to them as far as a direction to go forward. And so that's probably one area where I do take a lot of pride and pleasure in the fact that as an industry, we are definitely coming together and setting aside some of our individual differences, but bringing our collective interest together as a whole to promote the industry and to speak with one voice. And so that's definitely something that we're going to be trying to continue to work on and achieve going forward. If we're going to have a stimulus package, we want to be able to present information in a way that Congress can take quickly, digest, understand, and run with, so that we can get something meaningful done.
Yeah,
I was going to
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, Tina, I'm sure that is a testament to that communication and meeting together and being able to go back and forth and build. We love those water associations and organizations too, and because it matters. So, Tina, how have you seen? And just go ahead on your comment that you wanted to make. But as far as the outreach and staying connected, what's next for y'all?
Those are good questions. I guess following up on the point that Vanessa was just making about infrastructure, because in some ways this is perhaps part of what is also next. There's a lot of uncertainty, of course, around many issues, including whether we will actually see movement on infrastructure as we come into an election year again, and all the uncertainty around COVID and what resurgence may mean. And our economy has never really experienced the jolts that it has. So there's all that uncertainty out there. So certainly keeping track and monitoring things is key. But the point I was going to make in terms of the infrastructure, again, not to take away from other critical needs such as highway or even broadband, but a lot of times when you hear infrastructure, drinking water and wastewater are the third or fourth item that's mentioned. And of course, in comparison to highway funds, we're a smaller piece of that pie. But I think in the industry, people have recognized the need for a long time. If you think about, you're in Chicago, for example, think about the age of those pipes and lead service lines and replacement and all the various needs that we have, even as there's also emerging contaminants coming online that are going to require monitoring and treatment, like PFAS or microplastics. So there's a lot of needs that we've recognized in our industry, but I think in some ways, if there is a silver lining in the COVID pandemic, it might be that it's finally shown the light on this need for the broader public. And I think people are beginning to understand and truly value water. I'm old enough to, when I grew up, you might remember air, and it was always free at a gasoline station when you filled your tires. And I remember reading an article when I was in my early 20s that at some point you would pay for air, and I couldn't imagine paying for air. And in the same way, we've taken water for granted as a need that should be a very cheap commodity. It's just water. We have, major oceans, and, why is my water bill becoming such a huge percentage, particularly for the people who have a more modest income of their overall take-home pay? Well, there are a lot of reasons for that. And I think we understand and appreciate that in our industry. But I think, again, the critical use and need for water in this pandemic, just basic hand washing, as well as other, sanitation needs or the change with people at home has really brought that to light.
Yeah, I love that. It reminded me of just having that conversation at home with your family and why, when you do get that high bill, it's okay, right? Oh, if it's a high bill. I had a conversation over the holidays that they were complaining about water, and I was like, wait a minute. These are very important things. And so you do have to kind of take on that advocate role, even in our own communities. And so I am excited that this is on the news and we're able to talk about it. We're able to share with our leaders in our communities and start there, because we know a lot of that change happens in local communities. But thankfully, hopefully, right, that we will get some funding to help with infrastructure. It's a great need for sure. Sienna, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask or add?
I just want to ask if there's a message from WWEMA to, to the world, if there's any last message you'd like to share or thought you'd like to share.
The message for us that all of this has really brought home is the importance of working together, and the importance of communication, and the importance of water and technology, and ensuring public health and protecting our environment. And we've really seen how critical water is from the sanitation perspective, for just life in general, to go on. And as our economy recovers, the importance of that continual source to be there and to make the best use of the water that we have available moving forward. And so I'm excited about that, and I'm really energized by the fact that the industry is coming together at this really critical time to promote the importance of water. And I'm really looking forward to what we can accomplish in the next 6 months and well into the future, just making sure that we stay high up on that radar screen for everyone with acknowledging the importance of water.
Well, I think that was great. Yeah.
And how can people engage and interact with WWEMA?
I can have Tina speak to some of our social media, but we definitely have our website, www.wema.org. We keep updated information there. We have, our doors are always open, we say. So not only are we providing services specifically to our members, but we try to help the broader industry and community. So anyone that wants to call or have a question or want to know how to get involved, the information is there, and we're always talking to other folks, not just our members, about water issues and concerns, and putting people in the right direction, pointing them in the right direction, or connecting them with the right people, because we really feel like our job is not only to represent and improve the conditions for our members, but also the industry as a whole. And so we take a lot of pride in helping boost the entire industry and help other companies out.
Well, we thank you for saying yes to being on this video chat with us and sharing your knowledge with everyone. I do this a lot, so I wanted to quickly take our picture here. So if y'all want to give me a smile or wave there, yeah. So a lot of the times we, get together on these meetups, and I think they're so important. So we have one every 2 weeks. So I'll send you a link if you guys want to join us for one of these with the industry. It'd be great to have you.
Definitely like to hear that, or what the schedule is. I don't know who else you have up or other associations. Who's next on your list, so to speak?
Honestly, it's amazing the different members of the community that call in. I mean, we've had people who are pipe fitter welders call in. We've had people who visit refineries or work in refineries, water operators. I mean, it really, our community is pretty diverse. And so it's been really fun every 2 weeks connecting with them just like this through video chat and seeing their faces and hearing how they're doing, hearing their stories. A couple people who've experienced furlough over the past 2 months that have gotten to go back to work, we've been able to cheer them back on. So it's one of those things where as many of us around the country are feeling isolated, being able to hop onto Zoom and see everyone's faces has been such a high point, a really great way to connect. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and just talking about these very important issues and the wonderful role that WWEMA plays. So we're so grateful to have you as just part of our community and doing the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.